everyone, welcome back to Underreported Stories, where I cover the news that CNN, MSNBC, and even Fox News fail to report or don't report on enough. And today we have a ton of stories. Specifically, we have an insane story about women's rights out of California. We also have a story about election interference in Wisconsin, and the story of a school worker who's going to spend 9 years in jail for stealing chicken wings from little kids. So, without further ado, let's get into the 5 underreported stories that you need to know. A Davis, California high school seemingly got rid of its girls' locker room and changed it to an all-genders locker room while leaving the boys' locker room completely untouched. There's video footage provided by a mom in the Davis school system, and it appears to show this weird discrepancy where girls have to share their locker rooms and boys don't. I pulled up the video and we're just going to watch it together. And for the listening audience, there's not a lot of audio, so I'm just going to kind of talk over it. So here we have the Davidson High School. I'm assuming it's a high school based on how big it is. And you see somebody walking up to the gym lockers. I'm going to kind of fast forward a little bit. And here you'll see the boys' locker room. And then across the way is supposed to be the girls' locker room. And the boys' locker room does say boys' locker room. But when you get closer to where you would assume the girls' locker room would be, it says all genders locker room. Now, one question I initially had was, is there a boys, a girls, and an all gender? Well, I reached out to the school district and I have not heard anything back. So if I do, I'll update you. But based on the background check I kind of did on this school, I'm not entirely surprised if they got rid of the girls' bathroom completely. Just a little background on this school district. I hopped on to their school page to see if I could get in touch with the communications director to get clarification on this video. And what I found was a land acknowledgement. When I hopped on the Davis Joint Unified School District page, it just says native land acknowledgement statement for the school district. And it talks about the importance of all the land acknowledgements and blah, blah, blah. So again, I'm not entirely shocked at what I found. And then again, in my quest to find the communications director, I went to the administration tab of the website and found some ridiculous positions. So you have like the obvious ones, which who's doing their website? It's so dumb. Like, associate superintendent of student support services, chief strategy, totally fine. Totally fine. Director of fiscal services. Of course you need that. Then you get down lower and it's like Director of Climate Activities, Energy Manager, which maybe that's interesting. Manager of Prevention and Wellness. Do you mean nurse? Like, I'm confused by some of these titles. Some of it just felt silly. The fact that you have a climate activist as a coordinator on your administrative website seems insane, but it gives you a picture of what this school district is all about. I don't just want to assume the school did it out of malicious intent because it is unclear why the school district opted to change the girls' locker room only. But I think there are 2 schools of thought worth diving into. 1, the boys are unwell, and it is a majority of biological boys claiming to be girls who want to be in these locker rooms for either perverse or sad reasons. Therefore, there is more motive to make the girls' locker room all gender because that is where you're seeing the problem occur. The second school of thought, which is where I tend to land, is that these school districts are actually incredibly misogynistic, and they think that little girls should just shut up and comply and be politically correct. And what they're doing is being inherently anti-woman, and what it's doing is teaching little girls to ignore their God-given instincts. Moving on to our next story, which is a little election interference news. A city clerk in Wisconsin was accused of posting Yahoo News articles inside of voting booths, seemingly in hopes of swaying potential voters to vote in that clerk's preferred manner. Reading here from The Federalist, the article is titled Wisconsin City Clerk Accused of Posting News Clip in Voting Booth. And when you scroll down, it talks about how the Wisconsin Institute for Liberty and Law, we'll call it WILL, is filing a lawsuit of sorts. It's a warning letter to a city clerk named Shar Nagel after multiple reports were issued about news articles being placed within each voting booth. So in summary, Wisconsin voters had their early voting. It was ahead of their Tuesday primary election. And the ballot has 2 referendum questions on there. And it's about whether the Wisconsin Constitution should stop the state legislature from giving its power to, or the fiscal responsibilities to, the governor. So the governor is essentially spending billions of dollars on federal pandemic relief, paying for big government initiatives, etc. And that is actually supposed to be the power of the state legislature, but they've kind of ceded it over to the governor. And so these referendums are about whether or not to give power back to the appropriate governing bodies, and therefore, giving the power of the purse back to the people. But the Yahoo News article characterized the referendum through very different partisan lenses, pitting evil Republicans and conservatives against the oh-so-kind governor and the nice liberal interest groups. That is obviously illegal. You can't do that, okay? Let me explain kind of the ins and outs. I actually think the Federalist did a good job of explaining the ins and outs in this cease and desist section. It says state laws prohibit such interference by election officials. It's called electioneering, and it relates to any activity that will influence voting at an election. So this is a letter, again, that was sent to Char Nagel, the city clerk, saying Wisconsin state law prohibits posting and distribution of election-related materials at the polling places, at locations where absentee ballots may be cast, or near the entrance of these locations. So yes, placing a Yahoo News article in the voting booth is incredibly problematic. Violators of this could face up to 6 months in jail or a $1,000 fine, or both. So obviously people are calling for a cease and desist of this. The city has heard about this pushback, albeit begrudgingly, and the clerk was ordered to take down the news article. I get that the person that did this was a woman, and women are maternal. And so I believe the natural instinct here is to help people be the most informed. It's probably coming from a place of wanting to help. But in practice, it's incredibly arrogant, and it's incredibly demeaning to people. They don't need your help to vote. I don't need your help to vote. Sure, I will admit we are generally an uninformed population, but it's not the city clerk official's job to put partisan news clips in the voting booth to help people. That is illegal for a reason. But what's not illegal is free thinking. Well, yeah. And if you want merch that represents your views of free thinking, look no further than my merch line, Based. Based hats are right back here in my studio, and they are the opposite of woke. We're based in logic, facts, and truth. Like I said, based, not woke. So if you want to support this show and the work I'm doing here at Underreported Stories, please be sure to check out basedinlogicapparel.com, or just click the link in the description to get your gear. Be sure to tag me on Instagram too when you post photos in it, okay? Next up, some more potential election interference. The Trump campaign confirmed it was hacked by Iranian hackers. This was reportedly the result of a targeted email phishing attack. This all comes from the New York Post, saying that obviously Trump, the Republican nominee, and the whole campaign as a whole said it had been hacked and had blamed Iran for breaking into its data days after Microsoft revealed that the terror-backing nation had been ramping up online activity in its attempt to influence the U.S. election. So Stephen Chung, who is a Trump spokesman, wow, I can't speak right now, but Stephen Chung, made the announcement following a report from Politico that said the outlet had received anonymous emails that included documents from inside Trump's campaign operation. So I guess what happened, let me scroll down. It says, on Friday, a new report from Microsoft found that Iranian hackers broke into the account of a, quote, high-ranking official on the presidential campaign in June of 2024, which coincides with the close timing of President Trump's selection of now vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance. So what's interesting about this is that the documents, which insiders confirmed are authentic, these were documents that were sent to a Trump high-level official detailing J.D. Vance's record, past statements, quote, potential vulnerabilities. This was all dated back in February, and that information was sent over to a White House official, seemingly official, but it was actually a phishing scam. The emails were from an anonymous AOL account from a person who identified himself only as Robert. And then when asked how he came into possession of the sensitive materials, he gave some ominous response like, "I suggest you don't be curious about where I got them from. Any answer to this question will compromise me and also legally restricts you from publishing it." So that's interesting. Now, the motivation here is very important when we're dissecting the story as an American, right? And I believe the New York Post brings it up very eloquently that U.S. intelligence reportedly found increasing evidence that Iran has been working on retaliation plots against Trump and other related people, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, because of the 2020 assassination of Qasem Soleimani, who was the leader of their Quds force, their Iran Revolutionary Guard, right? So obviously those motivations are very important. Of course, Iran doesn't want a U.S. government that would be fearless in taking out their top regime leaders. But that brings me to the second point, which is that if you're looking for a president who will instill fear into our enemies, according to our enemies, Trump is scarier to them. Based on this, that's what I take away from it. Democrats love that talking point that Trump is bad for our international image. Okay, no, but truth be told, if that's how maybe France feels, well, then I could give a flying fart what France thinks about us. They don't like us anyway. They want to be all polished and they think they're better. I don't care. What I do care about is I care what terrorist regimes think of us because they want them to be scared of us. And clearly this story exemplifies the Iranian government, our enemies, are fearful of Donald Trump winning because it means they'll be losing. Speaking of winners and losers, if I were to crown a winner for this week already on a Monday, it would be Texas Republican Tony Gonzales. And if I were to crown a loser, it would be Tim Walz. Because Representative Tony Gonzales was elected back in 2021 after then Governor Tim Walz served 6 terms in Congress and claimed to be the, quote, senior most enlisted service member to have been elected to Congress. Turns out that wasn't entirely true, meaning that after serving 20 years in the Navy, Tony Gonzales was the senior most enlisted service member elected to Congress, and he never ran on that or held him up on that pedestal because Tim Walz lied about his position. This is a tweet posted from Representative Tony Gonzales of Texas. It says, "Military service at any level is an act of valor. Embellishing your record is not. I proudly served 20 years in the U.S. Navy with multiple deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq. Retired as a Master Chief. Yes, that makes me the highest ranked enlisted service member to ever serve in Congress, a claim Governor Walz has falsely paraded around. It's important to call out dishonesty. Tim Walz should immediately be withdrawn as the vice presidential nominee." And I'm always hesitant personally to talk about stories like this because, I've never served in combat. I'm just a civilian who talks into her camera. And I'm thankful to everyone who served because my lazy ass didn't. But I lay that on the table and then I set it aside because whether I was in the military or not, whether you were in the military or not, you know what lying is, you know what embellishing is. And that's what Tim Walz's record seems to do. Being this precious gem of a man that he is, Tony Gonzales did a phone interview with the Federalist where he talked about the claims of stolen valor. And one specific comment that Walz has made that you've probably heard in the news a lot about how he carried weapons of war, yet he never went to war. So odd, right? Well, in the article, I want to pull this up for you guys. He says, "Nobody who served forgets his duty history." So this is Tony Gonzales saying anyone who served 3 years or 30 years knows exactly what they did and didn't do. I did 20 years in. I remember all my deployments, commands, and final pay grades. When somebody at the Federalist asked him about Walz's remarks about, quote, weapons of war that I carried, that's what Tim Walz said, and the Federalist reporter is asking Tony Gonzales about this, he said that Walz was claiming to serve in combat, and this upset him because, if you carried a weapon in combat, you would know. It's okay that not every service member goes to war, but let your record be your record, right? This wouldn't be a problem if Tim Walz just let his record be his record. Then he'd be the second highest, ranked enlisted service member in Congress. That's not problematic at all. And now one thing I want to harp on is people out there, including Tony Gonzales, calling on Tim Walz to withdraw from the VP nomination because of these lies and because of this deception. I am firmly against this, okay? I thought that any smart politician in Kamala Harris's role would have picked a much better running mate than that dude. He's radical, he's got a terrible record, he's clearly a liar, and he watched his state burn over race riots just 4 years ago. It was political malpractice for the Harris campaign to pick this guy. He's much easier to run against. So as a conservative, I am not in favor of Tim Walz stepping down over his lies. Just run against them. And if you like watching or listening to the show that debunks lies like Tim Walz lies, then please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment below if you're watching this on YouTube, Rumble, or X. If you're in the listening audience, please be sure to give this podcast a 5-star review. It really helps with boosting the show in the algorithm. All right, let's get to our final story. An Illinois school worker is going to spend 9 years in prison after she stole 11,000 cases of chicken wings from unsuspecting kids during the pandemic. So I'd like to introduce you all to, what is her name? Vera Liddell. She's an Illinois school worker who's going to spend the next 9 years in prison because she stole all these chicken wings worth $1.5 million that were meant for students during the height of the COVID pandemic. Vera Liddell, I mean, y'all, she's a hustler, I will say that. But she used her position as the food service director at Harvey School District 152 to carry out the unappetizing crime. I love the New York Post's little commentary on it, but it's so funny. It says she used her position to carry out crime that the school district didn't realize until prosecutors got involved. This woman is 68 years old, and she started this scheme in July of 2020 and didn't stop until February of 2022. How did they not catch her? She's going to be in prison, like I said, for 9 years. I love you guys, if you're in the listening audience, it's so funny. It's just like these pictures of this woman and then just like chicken wings just to drive the point home. But the article goes on to say, while she brought up the incredible amount of poultry and used a school cargo van to pick up the food, students never saw a single wing. Schools were closed, but the district near Chicago was still sending out meal kits to students in remote learning during the height of the pandemic. So these were children who needed food, and she was stealing from them the whole time. It's like stealing candy from a baby, but in this case, it's stealing chicken wings from school children. This is an aside. And I'm not being entirely serious here, but it's like a slight defense of this woman. What she did was awful. But it's a funny story. But, there are people in Chicago and other major cities that don't get charged this long for prison for schemes that are far more disturbing, that are far more violent than this. So, yeah, I want justice for these kids. It's awful. But I also hate the double standard of gang members getting off the hook while the chicken wing woman who, again, let's be honest, was working hard. At least she was hard working to scam that school district. She's going to go to jail for a long time for whatever, chicken wings. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not negating that it's disgusting. I just want justice for everyone instead of just the chicken wing woman. Does that make sense? Anyways, if you're a real one and you stuck around until the end, will you be sure to drop the chicken wing emoji so I know you're a true story seeker and truly part of this community. Thanks, friends. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked what you heard, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment about how beautiful, stunning, and funny I am. And if you want more content based in logic, be sure to click over here for more videos and clips of my show. If you have the means to financially support the show, consider purchasing from my merch line, Based Apparel, linked right below. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you back here next time. Bye, friends.